And we're live. Hello again.
Oh, again. Where were we yesterday? We wanted to do positive vision today, didn't we?
Yep, I was going to let you talk this time.
All right, fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking I'd
But
um, try and focus on seeing it from your perspective rather than criticizing it, at least for a while. And
mm,
then after that stage is finished, then we can go into me sort of bringing in my own views. But yeah, try and
I'm gonna try
understand.
and integrate it, maybe. Yeah, it might be. I don't know if we'll get to that today. It depends on how long it takes me to get through this. Oh, I feel woefully underprepared. I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm gonna try and collect my thoughts on all this bunch of stuff. Oh, right. So, positive vision. Start. So for me, a bunch of prerequisites that you need to have, or that I have needed to have in order to have this positive vision, which is a political system, or our political system functioning in a way that's not quite so hilariously broken. And what I mean by that is forthright individuals who want the betterment of humanity acting honestly in the realm of politics, which is hell of an ask from where we currently stand. I don't know if I'd been told that statement a couple of weeks ago, I might have burst out laughing, to be honest. Well, let's take that as a given.
That's a
Many
bit of a
people,
that's a
it is a
large
bit of a
given.
thing, but I will say that many people are working on the ennoblement of the average individual in Western society in particular, and I think to a large success. I think the internet itself has helped with that to an unbelievable degree, even though it has also done the opposite. I think overall it's actually going to be net benefit in the end, but I think we can put that aside. Personally, I've been very. I've always been particularly libertarian. We've sort of had these arguments for a long time, and I've been sort of wavering there and abouts with that. I've come to see now that that's basically an ideology, and that's not very helpful. So for me, for the longest time, any form of collective action was inherently negative. The
Mm-hmm.
idea that the culture could, through collective decision making, through collective resource in particular, invest in something or take an action with a positive outcome. I viewed that as negative because of the taxation as theft kind of crap, um, which is a result of the ideology. No longer see it that way, so now I can actually see a positive outcome of collective investment. So when I talk about a positive vision for the future, we have a myriad of problems that we as a culture complain about consistently. And particular to our conversation so far, I think the big through line is um, average flourishing or suffering of the average individual. And I have a tremendous positive vision towards that now because okay, we talk about government, we talk about taxing people to take money and move it from one place to another. We call this policy, which doesn't really make much sense to me because what it really is investment, right?
Yeah.
We're pooling collective resources and investing it, um, giving it to these days, but it's supposed to be investing it into places we see value. Um, Mostly these days, we give it to people who do nothing with it, or we invest it in things that could not sustain themselves on their own with the promise of shifting the market towards that and therefore boosting innovation in that sector, which I'm not opposed to. I actually think that's one of the uses of this investment that could be incredibly beneficial. So when I have a very positive vision for the future, I see as the average individual becomes more enlightened and aware, critical minded and open thinking, which I think is inevitable due to the nature of information on the internet, I see that though they may trail behind, politicians will eventually catch up, or we will just simply boot them out in course and replace them with some random average individual, which has happened a lot and to great success over the last few years. When you have a person such as that in a political position, they can put forth things to invest in that would actually net positive outcomes. So if we were to look at some random country, it doesn't really matter, we can take ours. We invest in a whole bunch of these things. They all sort of have a half-hearted reason that's more for political favour and currying support with a base or some kind of ideological argument or emotional argument. And they're not taken on the basement of what is the most that we could do, the fastest, the best, for making a better future. And I don't think it's very hard to imagine a good future if you can suppose or to convince a nation or a population or a certain class of politicians to put forth this as an investment ideal for what? The taxes of a nation? Is that the right way to say it? The treasury, maybe? The collective resource. And honestly, I think if any politician were to stand up and have this kind of argument of we collect resources to collectively take action, why don't we actually take action where we get something from it? That doesn't seem like an argument to me where the average citizen is going to go, no, how dare you? I think most people are going to go, okay, yeah. Even uninformed people. You know, that sounds reasonable. As far as I'm concerned, I also agree with you that energy is the biggest thing. Because without energy, you can't do other works, and you can't hang your hat on the future of technology without first having the energy required to use to invest in new technologies that would therefore be more energy intensive.
It feels
Same
like...
with the...
Have you changed your opinion in that area over the last months? Because the impression that I've got from you previously was... or possibly it was more the nuances that I was missing, that the energy is downstream of culture, and that a sufficiently ennobled culture will have no issue with energy because the innovations necessary to find more will be supported appropriately.
Okay, I see what you're getting at. I think when we had that conversation, I used the word resources. And I use that in terms of the consumerist conversation we had the other day. That a culture who is morally and ethically grounded in an ethos, a shared ethos, would not waste resources in such a trivial way and solve a lot of the problems there. That for me, that's more of the consumerist buying crap, disposing of everything and not caring kind of attitude. I don't see that as like when I see a great future of demands of energy, I'm thinking purely energy to run machines, to do extra work, to make lives and reduce suffering better, to heat homes, to run agriculture and farming, to feed people. I've brought my focus way down from, I don't know, down where from. When I say a great future, I don't mean, all the luxury technologies that one Western person could imagine. I mean one where every human being has light, power, a heat pump, food on their table, that kind of thing. And then, honestly, even on top of that, I can see almost every human being having access to some form of borderline space-age transportation energy for everything that they could need. Not unlimited, as nothing ever is, but energy so abundant and cheap that it could be used in such a creative way to invest into new technologies.
While at the same time the culture is ennobled sufficiently so as not to waste that energy and damage the ability to source it in the first place.
Yes. As far as I'm concerned, that's a prerequisite, because without a culture of individuals who have forthright moral intentions, the intention to collectivize a resource or our resources through taxation, we can leave aside the detail on that, and then apply it to better humanity itself. People aren't going to do that unless they've already ennobled themselves. So our big argument over the last few years, as a background, as far as I'm aware, was when a society collapses, why does it collapse? And our disagreement was always one I disagreed and said a society collapses because the moral foundations of the society collapses, which then uses them to fragment, distrust, and use resources without replenishing them, without care. Whereas I remember your argument was more of an expansion as resources are in abundance, and then a retraction as resources are running short. And then that is the growth curve and collapse for a society. I kind of actually want to leave that conversation aside.
Yep.
For me, we can dip in it slightly, but I honestly think the average person is becoming more morally forthright in our society today, which is kind of hilarious given all that we're seeing on our propaganda screens. A very small, very loud subset of them are going absolutely insane, and I think we all know who that is. But I think the rest of
it's going to be entertaining to watch.
Yeah, great documentary I watched the other day. I mentioned to you on that. It was brilliant, and then right halfway through it switched from being brilliant and hilarious to about as horrific as you can imagine. Really caught us off guard. Good like that. I won't mention the name. But I think the rest of the world is looking at that group and going, what the fuck is happening here? I need to know what's going on. And I need that to not happen to me or the people I care about. And I think that's enough of a kick up the pants to get people to engage more. We've had a collapse of morality in the West for a very long time. And funnily enough, through this technology and through reason, which I wouldn't have expected, we're sort of having a return to the values of which we had, a callback to the days of old in many people's eyes.
So finding the same philosophical conclusion that was previously reached via biblical means as the dominant form of reason of the age, and now via modern logic, you could say.
Yeah, that you can actually walk the path of reason and evidence and end up in that same place. That is a moral philosophy that undergirds a society that makes it rise. It's like, these are the things that work, and you need to behave in this way or it's not going to work.
Yeah.
I do want to leave that aside because I really want to elucidate a vision of, we have a group of people, a society, a country, for example, who on average is able to say, let's invest our collective resource in a way that benefits not just us, but humanity itself in the most positive way. Now, we're a small country, so that kind of makes a difficult example. We can run with that if you like, but we could take an example of a bigger country, because then there's more resources to use and you can do more good. Whichever works. It kind of doesn't matter, because it's just a matter of scale.
Doesn't it matter more how much there... Doesn't the resources per person that are available to distribute among those people matter more?
The resources per person, so this, you're talking like GDP per capita kind of thing?
Well, that's one way to define it, though different.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
talking about, when I say the resources available for the nation, I mean what would be the collective pile tax revenue that could be invested in specific areas. So that would depend on GDP per capita and population, both.
But wouldn't the effect of a larger pile uh, be diffused by needing to be spread among more people? So the
No, I'm not talking about redistribution.
but you're still
I'm not
needing
giving.
to. No, I'm not saying
This is
giving it away. I'm saying that the investments. So you collect the resources for investment toward the future. You then invest them, and those investments have a certain rate of return.
yes.
Would that rate of return per unit of investment change depending on the size of the initial investment? So if you can invest 10, you get back 1. If you can invest 100, you get back 20. So 20% rather than a 10% return. Because otherwise you've got the same return to spread among the population.
I don't think so. I think per dollar input will give you the same per dollar output, whether you put in 10 billion or 100 billion.
So
I think you're going to get.
Where would the difference be between a large country and a small country?
Well, more resources can do more good. Even if it's a linear equation, there'll be boundary levels that a smaller nation couldn't do. So larger projects that a smaller nation couldn't invest in to a significant level, and therefore not net out a significant reward or anything.
So certain thresholds for certain kinds of investment, or
yes, okay. that was my point. Like, so a nation like America could invest a hell of a lot more in something like fusion than our country could.
Yeah. So rather than saying that the larger investment begets a larger return, if you have 100 units to invest, you can buy the thing that costs 90 and then returns 20%, whereas if you only have 10, you can only buy the thing that costs 8, and that only returns 10%.
Yeah, when I say a larger return, I simply mean, well, you can do more social good with more dollars, period.
More dollars per person for buying, say, educational aids, or?
As ultimate. So, okay, we'll take that example. If you're talking about investment in education, if you throw, if a nation can collect $100 million in resources, or a nation can collect 10 billion, the nation with 10 billion is going to be able to do more good per dollar, assuming that they were invested in the same way. Now, you can break that down by per capita, but I don't think that matters too much in general, because
would a ennobled society more wisely spend it than what we see today? Because there's the large hierarchies of managers that we see today and bureaucracies tend to absorb a great deal.
Yeah. If the government actually viewed the use of its tax revenue as investment, and then weighed that investment based on the return, you could very easily go, okay, we can say we want to do this project for education. We have these 10 proposals. Each one of them we can rank order by investment into, investment out, predicted. We can group test that with a bunch of people or a bunch of experts in the field. We can say, right, this one's going to be the one that works best. We're going to do that, discard the rest. Rather than an auction system of bidding for the lowest dollar, or not even, saying we want to help teachers. All right, let's throw this much pay rise at teachers, which does nothing, by the way, because you're not looking at the return on your investment. You're not thinking about what is the thing we actually want to do, which is increase, say, literacy rates or interest in the STEM field, etc. Throwing money at a problem is not always the answer. But my point with this isn't to say that I, in particular, have a detailed policy set of what I would invest in were I in the position of Prime Minister for 10, 15 issues. My point is to say I can see a future where if collectively as a nation, I can't believe I'm using that word so much, would have hated that when I was younger, we invested our resources into things that netted great output for humanity itself, then we could have a much brighter future. And off the top of the bat is what I think are the obvious ones, which is energy investment to make energy cheaper for everyone, which includes fossil fuels, but that's a temporary solution until we get to nuclear, which as far as I'm concerned is the real answer. I don't know what's going on with fission. I've heard a lot of rumblings in the background that something's happened with that recently, but I don't pay attention to that, to be honest.
Just to cover that particular one for 10 seconds, what I heard had happened with fusion recently was that the laser fusion lab, where they take a pellet filled with hydrogen and shoot big lasers at it and then make it fuse, they got 2.7, I think it was megajoules out after this little pellet had absorbed 2.5, but the lasers used 300.
Okay. So, yeah. People have been rumbling about that forever, and I'm not very interested because, well, okay, say that. I think a sizable investment into researching that technology is worthwhile because of the potential upside. Same with any kind of energy investment. Because it's one of the fundamental issues and it's a technology-based one, R&D is everything. And I think that should be a very large part of collective resource, is when you are thinking about R&D, whether you know, some multimillionaire can throw $1 million at a problem, like that's cool. But a nation with $10 trillion can throw a lot more money at R&D than even a billionaire could.
And you only need to find the right way to do things once.
Yes. And if the rest of it's down the tube, then, well, that sucks in the meantime, but as soon as that thing kicks in, and all of a sudden energy costs go, to 1,000th the cost of what they were for the average citizen, that's a huge deal, because it's, as you well know, thinking about the fossil fuel industry, it's not just your power bill, it's every single product you ever buy. It's your food, it's everything. And then with that...
In terms of investments, something that's often missed in that line of what to invest in for good return that I think is worth just adding into the equation here, you can invest 100 units in more energy generation, so you're then just feeding... You put up bigger wires to feed more power in, but if your house is full of drafts and cold windows, then that's just going to go straight out the other end. Whereas if you take that same 50 units, 10 units, apply that to draft stopping and some double glazing and some insulation just to make the houses warmer, then you need to produce less energy. So in a lot of cases, the existing supplies are then sufficient, and it's instead of having to invest in this year's energy and then same again next year and repeatedly to replace the fuel and maintain it and so on, you insulate, and then the continued payback is more of energy not used.
That would be, I put that in investment in infrastructure.
Yep.
So along the same way as investing in like highways or railroads, that kind of thing, power lines, which is also on the top of that list. As a large deal. I didn't used to think that was a big deal, but it is. Investment in energy, investment in infrastructure, investment in education, that is huge. Although I'm very anti-public school system, so that's an interesting aspect on that one. They've failed in a ridiculous way, and I don't think more money into that system is a good idea, but there are ways around that, and there's ways to play that out. Malnutrition, disease, these kinds of things are where humanity itself should be spending its money. Now, we in the Western nation can sit here and go, okay, that's not the biggest deal for us. Energy is a big deal for us, which is why we keep coming back to the fossil fuel thing. Personally, I think the smartest way forward is to do, for energy front, is to do investment into the three biggest potentials. One actual, which is fossil fuels. I think more investment into that in places where we don't allow it, like our country, where we can't drill for it or anything like that. I think investment into that is a great idea because, yes, it is a temporary resource, and we're going to need as much of it as we can to get through till we have a replacement.
So when you say investment into it, one way that could often be interpreted is pumping as much as possible as quickly as possible. But from what you just said, I suspect that may not be quite what you're thinking.
No, I mean, okay. Removing the restrictions that stop people from doing it in the first place is probably a good idea. All of the energy that we need to heat our homes and not starve, maybe letting people actually go and get it with their own money. That'd be awesome. And then not punishing the hell out of them when they do that. That would also be awesome. But R&D development and technology for that as well. What jumps to the top of my mind is fracking, as that was originally R&D project and needed great returns. Things like that. There's always new ways to think about a problem. Some form of R&D budget for anything, but we use fossil fuels. We use a lot of it anyway to make it more efficient, to potentially recycle anything into it that we can in the meantime until we find another solution. You have this vision of it declining and going away. I'm sure you have far more data than I do about the timeline of that, although on the infinite timescale, I agree. I'm going to assume that your timeline's relatively correct because you research it a lot more than I do. And it makes sense to my mind. As that timeline plays out, some investment to keep it hobbling along until we have our solution could go a long way to making sure people don't, freeze and starve. As well as investment into the other forms of technologies that we have that work sort of, but could be better. And then the, the Hail Mary ideas that would solve a lot of problems if we invested into them. I see a way, due to my faith in the ability of humanity to learn and innovate, and my perception of how little we've discovered technologically in terms of physics, for example, but we'll leave that one aside because we've gotten in trouble with that before with people. In terms of things and technologies that are underdeveloped or under-invested in. Like I was looking into nuclear stuff the other day after we were talking about it, and as far as I can tell, the investment and the research and development that's happening in nuclear now could have happened 30 years ago, but it was shut down due to fear about it. I was like, we could be 30 to 40 years ahead of where we are with nuclear right now and have the majority of the problems solved, as the ones coming out in very recent times addressed almost all of the issues that people have with nuclear. The safety, the meltdown problems, and the efficiency problems, which are looking like they're solved already. The other thing that I see is that international investment in the poorer countries in the world, if done right, is actually one of the best things that the West could do, which I think is surprising to my own ears. If we collectively got our resources together in a way that was efficient and then didn't waste them on feel-good projects in our own nations and instead did, some charity work or something, we could invest in some of the things that were further down that list of priorities on our nation, but are far higher up on the list of priorities for other nations. Things like malnutrition, safe medical care for pregnant mothers, for example, that's a big deal. Access to food, farming and irrigation practices that are not very well known. Germ theory, that's a big one that we should really be teaching people, because a lot of people, a couple billion in the world, don't really understand that, and that's causing a lot of trouble. Separation of drinking water and other water. these things probably wouldn't cost a lot of money to invest in terms of education.
There was one I heard about. There was I forget which country it was, and it's probably for the best that I've forgotten which country it was, but there was a tradition that was after the birth, the baby would be put to the side, and then the mother would be cared for, and they would having a lot of babies die, or not washing hands before taking care of the birth process. And it's like, to us with germ theory, of course, like, good God, no, you need to have cleanliness here.
You don't want to look into the theories. Theories, that's not the right way to say it. That's going to sound weird. What some of the African nations believe about how to cure AIDS is pretty horrific as imagine. At least what I heard, this is probably complete lies, and don't crucify me for it. But I heard that there's several African nations that believe that the cure for contracting AIDS is to give it to someone else. And you just imagine the death toll from that simple idea, which could just be washed away with a bit of education,
but not by a know-it-all white guy coming in and telling them what is. You do it by taking some bright young kids from Africa and then take them to other universities, and they learn, then they come back and start a local university, and then it's like, okay, now how do you test this yourself and prove it yourself? And it's like
the simple answer is you have to do it in a way that works. We're not interested in, I spend a bunch of money and I feel really good because I helped. It's like, did you help? Did you really? Show me the data. Look, you helped. No, you didn't help. We're not doing it that way again. And we're going to have some growing pains if we as a species decide to actually try and end human privation and suffering, which we're doing without thinking about it. But imagine what we could do if we could actually think about it. Like, I don't remember when it was when I read, I think it was Enlightenment Now that I read. I don't remember when it was. It was a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But it absolutely blew my mind to see that, over the past 100 years, it's like starvation, malnutrition, poverty in general, access to electricity, disease prevalence, predation from species, destruction of the local environment, like everything that we're concerned about, particularly on the poorer half of the planet, is just getting better, unbelievably fast. And I think that is a knock-on consequence of the free market nature of the West and the sort of trickle-down system of the rest of the world, which is a weird thing to say, but I think it is. It's almost making me more interested in free trade throughout the world, which I was very against before because it harms our nations. But I'm thinking I'm coming around a bit on that because of the net global benefit to actually lifting poor people out of poverty across the planet, which would be amazing. With one asterisk on that is not trading with nations that use slaves, like we do now. I just came back from the warehouse and I know full well that everything in that fucking store was made by slaves in a particular nation. I'm not going to say that, but if we could actually get that down and stop trading with certain nations that are our enemies and use slave labor and then implement some form of free market system, we would suffer some consequences, but through collective action, we could cushion that enough and we could lift the poorest people in the world out of poverty even faster than we're already doing. And as far as I'm aware, that is the best way in the world to solve all of our problems. Because we have, 8 billion people now? Getting up there. And I think 4 billion of them can't read.
I think free trade is a powerful one, but it can be powerful in both directions.
I'm not sure on that one. I'm going to put that aside. My entire political philosophy for most of my life has been very anti that. And it's just sort of niggling at the background in this, so I haven't reconciled that. I'm not sure. I'm just going to say I don't know on that issue and leave it aside. But as far as I'm concerned, the best solution for humanity is to have every single mind on the planet as informed and educated as possible, with access to food and resources as much as possible, so that we can work collectively to solve the greatest problems that we have. And I don't see how that is not the best solution for the world's problems. And the best way to do that is to go to the half of the world that is struggling and to help them feed themselves, protect themselves from diseases and predators, and educate themselves. So we have twice the brain power, effectively, because they're not worried about freezing and starving, to solve all of our problems. And then integrate them into the neural net that we're building through some form of cheap cellular internet, something like 4G towers throughout the nation. It's probably the cheapest way to do it. Maybe satellite stuff, as we're starting to set that up now. That might be the way to go. Skip a lot of these earlier generation technologies. They don't need to invest in it so much because we refine and make a really cheap, basic solution that doesn't work great, but we can mass produce the fuck out of it and just blanket the world.
That's a really powerful one to my mind. We went through the Industrial Revolution through coal and from whale oil and so on. They can skip all the steps. Like I heard an example of someone in rural Africa who had a phone and he got a small amount of money, which was worth it for him because money is rather scarce. Yeah. And while he was being interviewed, his phone went off. Listen, say something in return. Okay, hang it up. And it was a translation job. So here is a soundbite. Translate it from this language to that language. Done. And he got a little bit of money from that. And his communication ability from having a cell phone, like how many decades of electrical development did they skip to go straight to cell phones?
Yeah, and you could do something very simple for communities like that, like dropping in a small generator with a bit of fuel or the kind of thing that you're working on. A tiny wee solar panel that can charge their couple phones and then the cell towers, a couple blocks away, or satellite internet, even better. You don't have to build infrastructure on the planet. We're building this high-tech satellite internet for the Western world, but being that it's satellite internet, it's going to work everywhere. So we can just blanket the world with high-speed internet for the whole planet, distribute mobile devices in some form of charging them, and boom, the world's connected. You can educate people through these devices far better than you can through schools and teachers. Sorry, schools and teachers, you can't compete with a tablet. That's reality, particularly for those who aren't literate.
Yeah.
That's an unbelievable tool. And to my mind, is if we could get the majority of the planet not worrying about where the next meal is coming from or when they're going to die, and start to worry about these issues that we're all bitching about in the West, but in a way where they actually don't want people to die, as a large population of our country seems to really, really want people to suffer, consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah.
Hard to tell. Probably a good mix of both, depending on who you speak to. And then throw on top of that the image of we get nuclear right in the West. We distribute them in a way for our nations that is worth it. That we get cheaper energy in the meantime, and because we're distributing them everywhere, the technology gets even better from there and there and there. And then by the time these developing nations are starting to need to move beyond fossil fuels, even in the best form of, say, natural gas, we can drop in, 9th gen nuclear reactor down into sub-Saharan Africa, and they can skip all the previous steps. We can invest and build it for them, and it just, bang, runs out for the whole local region. If we have these resources that we have gained through a partial accident in history in terms of our genetics and who we are, and then the philosophies that we have developed over time, which is also linked into that accident. It could have been any group of people, but it was us. Instead of investing all of our money to make our nation only amazing and then the rest of the world falls to shit, we invest all of our money into making our nation amazing with the express purpose of making each thing that we invest in cheaper and better and faster and able to be built better so that we can give it to these other nations. Like the argument for capitalism that always was, which was, we have flat screens and refrigerators and cell phones because the billionaires had them. But now I do, and I don't have any money in my bank. We get these things because people with obscene amounts of money wanted them and spent obscene amounts of money until the market grew enough that the manufacturing had enough resources to start mass producing. We could kick that a bit with the focus from investment in R&D into things, energy, education, transport. There's the list of possibilities goes on. And as far as I'm concerned, the West has lost its vision of a positive future. Like I'm thinking back about, 1950s America, the vision that they had for the world on the edge of the space race, where they thought humanity was going, was unbelievable. Like there was a guy who doing a documentary on that I was listening to recently who said that they believed by the year 2000 that they would have had all this stuff already. They believed that they would have had, free access to go to the space station on your personal flying thing with your unlimited energy and all the food that you could possibly imagine. And they put those dates so close to where they were because they thought putting them further out in the future was preposterous. 2001, not 2030, because they thought that was too far away and we would obviously have it before then. That was their perspective. They were so hopeful for what they could do to invest in the future. They were aiming up as an entire culture, and we don't do that anymore. And because of that, we are falling, because that's where we're aiming. We're aiming at the dirt, saying, we can't do any better, we're destroying everything, we're only going to go down. And then because we're all aiming there, we are shocked to find that that's where we go.
Something that comes to mind as a test of this philosophy, whoops, wake up computer, don't go to sleep, at my end, don't worry. How many of the core assumptions of how the future will work and how humanity will act can this philosophy as a guiding principle for an individual's actions survive losing and still be a good path to take for the individual? Because we don't know. Yep.
All of this rests on the idea that the average individual could be ennobled and aim up in his vision. To believe that he or humanity itself could learn new things and reach new heights and do so in a way that is beneficial to all, while still being humble before the unknown itself. And I believe that the average individual who actually embodies that, even though he may not make any technological leaps in his life, will be nothing but a net positive force in the world.
That one there is one that speaks strongly to me emotionally. The idea of being a net positive, having psychologically, emotionally matured, embedded in a version of the current environmental catastrophe view, the idea of being a net positive has immense emotional power. In the sense of, so I don't have to destroy the world just to live.
Yeah, that's the philosophy that the environmentalists have fed everyone. That your very existence is a destructive force. And you can't have that philosophy without simultaneously believing it would be better if I wasn't here. And then when someone comes along and says, no, actually, you can behave in such a way that your very presence makes the world better. And if you don't do all that you can and be all that you can, the world will be worse for it. That you are called to be, that you have a responsibility to manifest all that you could be, because that will make the world better.
And every individual, not it
Yes,
doesn't take 1,000, every individual who approaches
everyone.
things, it's like even if that individual can't take things from that to that, every individual by their actions will take that to that, and then another individual, and so on. But every individual that looks at it and says there's no point takes it a little bit further down, and it's the balance thereof. And so it's your hope for the future in terms of how good it's possible for it to be rests on collective action, but its effectiveness does not. The effectiveness of the
I
idea for an individual.
don't think it rests on collective action. I think it's, for me, I needed that vision of the best that we could do to see that in the short term, we could forestall a catastrophe and make a future that is unbelievably beautiful. For me, I needed that image logically to counteract the collapse image that I had. But in terms of the philosophy behind this, or behind all of this, I think it's more, it more comes down to, it comes all the way back to the thing we were discussing the other day, which is human beings act in the world. And there's a question of whether the action of a human being in the world is good or bad. And the environmentalist will say, bad always. And some conservatives will say, no, I don't think anyone says good always. I don't think so. Maybe Rousseau, kind of the people who think that human beings are nothing but pure and delicate flowers since birth and get corrupted and destroyed, which is not the case. But I think the real answer is, it depends where you aim. It depends on what you act. We are the sum total of our actions in the world. It is what you do that makes you who you are. And we live. This is where the Christian philosophy comes in for me. And this is, for me, the importance of that philosophy as it relates to made in the image of God, which I think is the most important thing in that whole religion, which is that our actions change the world. Not grand actions, but every single individual action for every second of every day changes the world in a way that cannot be taken back.
And there's an illusion that...
we, like animals, are aware of that. And we can consciously choose every individual action all of the time if we were able to focus on it, in which direction we want the world to go. And there is always going to be a value judgment on which direction is better. And you cannot know the consequences of your actions, whether they will be good or bad. Your conscience can tell you. Yeah, you cannot know logically. I don't think there's a way to calculate all of the catastrophes, but your conscience will tell you when you choose to act, this is the right thing that I'm doing, or this is not the right thing. And for me, this is where the metaphysics comes in, which is when you follow that conscience and you speak and act under your own attention in a way that is truthful, the result that you make in the world is good. And for me, that's what my spiritual faith hangs on. I was raised atheist. I'll just make a note on that. Kind of. There's a lot of asterisks on that. Like a lot. Maybe we'll do that another day. But for me, that's what it hangs on. Because we live in a universe where when we act morally and forthrightly in a way that our conscience calls us, and to be truthful, it makes the world better.
Yeah.
And that rocked my world when I discovered it. And that also says to me that if an individual can, in every moment of their life, look at themselves under conscious attention and say, is this action, like, what action do I take now to make things better? And when I'm tempted to do a thing that makes things worse, I'm aware of it and I don't do it. If every individual can do that in every moment of every day, that means that the nature of the existence that we inhabit and live in is the result of those choices. If everyone got their act together and actually aimed up and followed that instinct, I don't think that we could imagine in our greatest images the kind of paradise that we could make for ourselves. I think it is beyond comprehension what we could discover and what we could achieve. And I think everything about that direction, when you choose to go that way, if the majority of people did, would be good. And okay. I think the people who aim down and say that our action is bad are following the other path. And I think that they make things worse. I don't think that. As far as I can see, that is exactly what happens.
A couple of things to...
Sorry. No, you go. I'm just going to keep going on forever if you don't.
Okay. A couple of things to add to that come to mind for me. I agree with the goal, the target you've sketched out there. I'm thinking now of, well, how do you get there as an individual with all your failings and all your grumpiness and all your anger? And a few of the things that come to mind are, you're not waiting for a big thing here or a big thing there to change the world. It is precisely the small actions that are the most important. Because it's like being grumpy to the shop assistant who's just doing their job, or working at the till scanning your items as you buy them from the supermarket. Like, that might not seem like a big thing. But the attitude of being grumpy and combative at them, and then grumpy and combative at your neighbour and your spouse and your child and so on, it's like that carries on. And it's not...
even when you're... I think it matters even when you're alone and no one's there.
Yeah.
Because you will have the consequences of your actions even if no one's there. And you're right, it is precisely the small things that happen every day, because they happen every day, and that magnifies unbelief. But also, if in all of your small actions throughout your entire life, the tiny little ones that don't matter, you let yourself be ruled by the sway of your emotions, you ignore your conscience and corrupt yourself and just go with it, then when the biggest thing in the world happens, the once-in-a-lifetime moment that would define and change the world comes to you, what makes you think you're able to make the right decision? If you've corrupted yourself your entire life on the tiniest little matters, when you're dropped with the weight of a container ship and stress and told to make the right decision, how the hell do you think you're going to do it? If you haven't embodied and lived that up to that point, worked that muscle, so to speak, I don't think you're capable of it.
Yeah, and you can't switch from one to the other by choice. Okay, you can't go 100% one to 100% the other by choosing to switch.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, it's like it starts off as you're a grumpy, insert the appropriate swear words there, and you sort of deny it, but partly you know it because if someone says that, you get angry back at them because you don't want to acknowledge it. And then you're just like, you need to see the result of that anger, and even just being aware of it, even just being, oh yeah, I shouted at that shop assistant and that was probably not a good thing. Like, that's a step. That's one step. which
Yes.
is almost nothing. And it's like just being aware of that, and then it's like next time you might cut your shouting off a little earlier and storm off because you knew it was a bad thing to do, and then after a while of just being aware of it and being aware that that's screwing me over as much as it's hurting these other people, and it's screwing the world over, and those effects ripple out because the person you shout at then doesn't feel so good when they go back to their child, and their child might go to bed after having an argument with their parent, and that's bad for them at school the next day, and that sort of thing can just ripple out.
And it does. It does.
Yeah.
It affects the whole world. It's sort of, if you take the... Actually, I'll put that aside. I want to get back to that, but there's something I wanted to mention about what you said before, which is I think the majority of people are probably through their own choice, but also equally as likely through a lack of cultural education, unconscious of what they act and do. That they live in habits, they're swayed by their emotions, and they don't pay attention to it, either on purpose or, I think it's probably on purpose, but they're not paying attention to what they're doing. They're being ruled by their emotions, which means they're being ruled by their history and most likely their trauma, their upbringing. And I think what we were describing before is the first step out of that is to make it conscious. You have to be aware of the actions you take, the things you express to others, of the things you say, the things that you do, everything. You have to be aware of yourself. And you have to be aware of yourself because the consequences of your actions matter. Because if they don't matter, as a lot of people believe, then why would I care what I do? Like, why would I pay attention to my actions and therefore the consequences of my actions if I didn't think that I mattered, number one, or that anything mattered, number two? So say someone's taken that step. All right, I've decided I matter. I've decided the world matters, which means what I do matters, which means I better know what the fuck I'm doing, because I haven't my whole life, and I've noticed that I've been doing things that I don't even like, that hurt other people and make things worse. I'm sure we all have been there in our life before and know people who are there now. Once you step out of that, you have a choice. Right, now my actions are conscious, at least as far as I pay attention to it, and it's very tempting to slip back into I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing. And in that moment, you have the choice, good or evil. Because if you consciously choose to do bad, that is evil. That's the definition of it. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew it was wrong, and I chose to do it anyway. That's the definition. And the other one is good. I did the right thing. I did it, and I knew that I was doing it, and I did it because it was right. And that's the choice.
I think gets in the way in some senses these days is... Now, this was a reaction to some stuff which has had its own consequences, but the idea of you're perfect the way you are. Now, I think that's an attempt to express the idea that who you are as a whole is not bad, right? But there can be bad things that you do. It's like I think a better way to phrase it might be no one is irredeemable, and have the additional part that you can get better, right? So, yeah, we've got different beliefs there, but, well, it's amazing how often on those...
What do you think?
Well, I was about to say, I was having a conversation at work today, and the guy I was talking to is Christian, and I'm not. It's like, I've got a edge of left field type spirituality, but the things he was saying, like, yes, I agree with that from a totally different perspective. It's like the totally different lines of reasoning converge to the same answer in a lot of ways.
Well, that's actually how I came to Christianity, believe it or not. As a side note for those listening, I was raised, hilariously, by New Age, hippie, spiritual socialists. I'm very far from that now, because I argued with them my entire upbringing because they actually allowed me to, which is unheard of for people like that. Until I started winning, and then they didn't like that so much. But that's so the point. It was a great whetstone to sharpen on. I wanted to make the point that I put aside before, which was the ripple out consequences. Before I came to true religious, spiritual belief, when it sort of was all of a bit of a metaphysical game to my young mind, I thought about this in terms of multiverse and time travel. You're talking about the actions that you're taking ripple out in forever. It's like, okay, yeah, that's a butterfly effect. And people go, if I went back in time and I changed this thing, it would change everything about the world. Where every second of every day, you're living in a moment where you can change everything. And nothing will ever be the same in the world again. It'll be a completely different world. It'll be as if you went to another universe where that action happened or that action happened. You're standing at a fork in the road when you don't have two choices. You have almost infinite. There's a probability curve in there, but still, at any moment you could take almost any action that changes the world from what it might have been to what it will be because of your action. And every single human being has the power to do that. And I think that's unbelievably mind-blowing if you pay attention to it. And I think humanity is so terrified of that power that we have. They're so shit scared of it that we bury ourselves in our phones and junk food and TV and VR stuff, literally boxing our eyes. And I do not want to look at what I am capable of. Because the truth is that we're capable of unbelievable power for good or evil.
Okay.
And I recognize that.
It sounds like you're quoting from Western occult spiritual philosophy.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, but it's the same thing. The quote, as I recall it, which is said many ways by different people who I've never heard of, but all the power that you will ever have is already within you. You only need to learn how to use it.
Yes.
You look at the people who made a big difference or who did something amazing, who we hold up on a pedestal, like Gandhi. What did he do? He walked. He thought. He worked out what to do, and then went and did it. That's the thing that he would have made, absolutely certainly, mistakes along the way. I did something to try and achieve that thing, but it didn't work. And then you learn from that. And that's the thing. It's not about not falling down. It's about getting up again, because you will fall down.
Aiming up.
To. Yeah. And
that's it. Just aim up.
And the take the bull by the horns, people use it colloquially just to say, oh, you just go do the thing. But it's like, no. Think of a bull charging at you. Literally look at the metaphor, and if a bull is charging at you, it is terrifying. It's like, I've never been charged at by a bull, but it's like, they're big animals. It could kill you.
Yeah.
Grab its horns and hang on. Yeah. And if it throws you to the side, get up again, because if you don't, it will stomp on you.
Yeah, you can't win your battles by running from them. And they're your battles, whether you like it or not.
Sometimes the battle is to run. If you're in a situation where you're held there by indecision
is it retreat or is it courageous escape?
Yeah.
Because courageous escape is not running from your problems. It's not the same thing. It's not retreat. In that situation, you'd be imagining escape from prison camp. That's courageous escape, and the retreat version is cowering in a corner.
Yeah,
the person who is the brave one in that scenario. But yeah, for Christianity, as far as I'm concerned, that is the made in the image of God metaphor. That's what it means to a Christian, which is the world was nothing but pure chaos. It was nothing. Like the next moment in time is not here yet. It's nothing. It's pure chaos that could be anything. And the God, metaphysics aside, God spoke with his words, his conscious attention, and his actions. He did so truthfully and with intention to make things better. And out of that, boom, something came about that was good, where things could exist and not suffer too badly. And that we are made in that image, that we have the power, unlike all of the animals, to make the conscious choices through our words and our actions to transform the potential chaos and the unformed world into a formed world, preferably one that we like. That's good. And if we do that through truth and not deceit, then it will be one we like. But if we do it through deceit, then it will be one we don't like. That's the image. But it's the same thing as you said before, is that we are unbelievably powerful because of that we have all this power within us. And like I said before, I think this is why we collectively bury our head in the sands. Not because we think we can't, but because we're terrified of the consequences of our choices. If we only realized what power we have in our hands and with our words. No wonder people sit down, shut up, and tie their hands together with phones. Like, I'm not going to do anything other than this, or look anywhere, or say anything, because fuck, what could I do?
Yeah.
A lot. And I'm terrified of it.
Yeah,
Not thinking about it.
I feel like it's worth addressing. Like, I don't want it to look like we're minimizing or belittling the challenges that people face. Like, I don't know the details of your challenges, and I think you know some details about mine, but like we've faced the times when, what's the point? Why bother trying? It would be easier to give up. It would be easier to just stop the pain by not living anymore. Like, that's...
Yeah. We both understand that. We've been there.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
And...
what I've learned...
Yeah.
is that you end up in that place through the lack of belief in what you're capable of, and in the vision of aiming down, and then your micro retreats, which is how psychologists see this. It's lots of little micro retreats, or lots of little courageous action. This is what we were talking about, the tiny decisions over time, the things that you do that matter, that are tiny. You do the lots of little ones that are retreats, then you're going to end up in a state of retreat, and then that it compounds, which is depression, effectively.
And sometimes, a lot of the time, it's not clear which is which.
Yes, and that was the point I was getting to, is that when you are in that state, all problems become so much bigger, and you become so much smaller, and you find it so much harder to determine what to act on. Whereas when you have started to ennoble yourself, it starts to run away on you, and you get to the point where if you were in such a situation, there's so much more of you to face it, and the problem looks so much smaller and so much more easily identified that you can just brush it away. Which is why people who have never been to such a place will commonly look down on those who have, because they think, well, I would never succumb to that. And it's like, yeah, but you don't understand. You can't succumb to that now because you've built yourself up for the last 30 years. And not everyone was so lucky to have an environment where they could do that. Some people had to walk through that hell. I don't know about you, but I certainly have. I've had a very rough life, and I've met a few people who have also had very rough lives, and it's amazing to me to see where you can come back from. That is unbelievable. After everything that I've not only seen and been through, but done, to be able to build myself back up to where I am now. And I see it even more with some of the people I know. It's unbelievably inspiring and hopeful. That's part of the positive vision. It's like, if I could build back up from where I was, and I have some very clear images coming to mind. Anyone can.
Yeah, I know someone who, anonymity, of course, and trying not to share any details that would be too personal to this person, but they came back from the edge of death by drugs. And like, think of the worst circles you can be in, the worst environments and traps in some senses, and this person's managed to climb back from that an inch at a time, and is now working on running their own business. They've got a new partner, they've had a new child, they're climbing up, but they went lower than I understand, because I haven't been that low. Like, for me, I was naive, and I was in a relationship which I thought the right, courageous thing to do was basically to sacrifice myself for the good of the relationship. And there'll be people who are far more knowledgeable about relationships than me, who just shake their head and, no, you idiot, that's not the right way to do it. But that was what looked like the right thing at the time, and that's the rock that I was beating myself on. And eventually, not for my own sake, but because of the impact that it was having on my son, I had left that relationship. And so if it wasn't for him being there to save, I don't think I would have saved myself. And like, life can get dark, and already knowing that, we're still saying that the potential is there to go up from that. You can climb from the deepest abyss. One analogy I showed, or I told to the therapist I went to afterwards to try and climb out of this, was that it was like I was in a fog filled with dragons that were sort of circling to get me, and I was trying to climb up out of this great hollow. And like, I knew there'd be a lot of climb up, but I was way deep in the ground in this hollow, climbing up through fog, and I couldn't see what was out there. And every now and again, an emotional storm would hit me, and I would have no idea what it was, and I just have to work out, okay, what is this? I don't even understand it, and work through it a step at a time. And by slowly doing that, like forging forward against whatever it was, and slowly building up myself through that process, because the more you take on, the stronger you get. Each dragon you slay becomes your strength. Yes. And now, rather than climbing up out of the hole, I feel like I'm climbing up the side of a mountain. So I've got into the positive territory now. I'm still a single parent, I'm on the sole parent benefit, but I've got a good job that's meaningful to me. My finances are all stable through a combination of luck, skill, and I don't know what, but I'm climbing up. Like, I can see a way forward. I haven't found a special someone, though I'd like to. That's the sort of, oh no, poor me, yada yada, you get the idea. Everyone's got that issue. But
it's not a small thing, that.
Yeah. And
no one's got to sacrifice yourself for it.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that one, I think, off camera.
Yeah, but I thought it was important to to not just look like... We're not naive to the struggles. But we still say how positive it can be and how worthwhile the struggle is. And sometimes, as you say, the struggle is not to hold on for as long as possible in place. It's to courageously escape and say, look at it and say, yes, this is not right. And by being here, I'm making the situation worse. And sometimes you can think that this person needs me to stay, and what will they do without me? And there was a little cartoon that I remember seeing of a woman who was on the ground struggling, and then a man comes along and lifts her up, and she's like, oh, you're so wonderful, and then he starts to sink, and she's like, why aren't you supporting me, and he's just sinking into the ground, and then he vanishes, and there she is complaining about how he's not helping her and how everyone's terrible. And for that situation, him being there for her to haul herself up on and to push him down, that's long-term bad for her, because then she'll keep that cycle going. And
that's... God, there's a lot I could say on that.
Yeah.
A lot. I don't know if we should go into that. But that's a whole other topic. But
yeah, it's a dark cycle for everyone involved. But
to bring it back to where we were, but including all of that, I don't remember who said it, but it was, for a tree to reach to heaven, its roots must first reach down to hell.
Yeah.
And the idea that you would have the strength to aim up properly in spite of the suffering of this world, and to fight the battles that you need to fight, and to withstand the evil of this world, because others will try to drag you down the second that you aim up. You must first have experienced the other side of it, and to understand it. That a man without the dark side is like a kitten without claws. Not going to do anything. You can say he's good all day and long, but as soon as you push it, it falls over. It's not the same thing.
It's like meek in the Bible, meaning someone who has a sword and knows how to use it, but keeps it sheathed unless it's the only option left. It's like...
I'm not even sure if it is an option left. From the swords into plowshares thing. I think... I'm still working through that, but I think part of that is actually to go to your death willingly, not acting in that way. I don't know that. I'm going to say that one outright. I'm actually very ignorant of the Christian philosophy. And I think anyone who claims that they aren't is lying. Unconsciously, because that thing has been around for 20,000 to 100,000 years, and it is deep as can be.
When you trace the roots down,
it's unbelievable.
And I think
there is real knowledge there.
Yeah.
That's, as far as I'm concerned, the interest for me.
The analogy about the tree reaching to heaven by its roots first reaching hell, I think, is good also from the perspective of how slow do trees grow. Like, you're not talking about it shooting up and down and splitting the earth at the same time. Like, you see a tree sitting on a boulder that it's split in half. It's like, here's a seed. What can it do? It's nothing. It's like, here's you.
It's 100 years.
You can barely survive in this everyday world. It's like, okay, what are you going to do? You're barely surviving. It's not just struggle under the weight until you grow strong enough to support it. It's look at the weight and think, is this the right load for me to bear? What would be better for me to do? And
that's bearing your burden or finding your cross.
Yeah, find your one, not the one people tell you.
And that's the thing. We all have a calling, which is the other part of the metaphysics. But I think we're wandering into that a little bit. We should do that another time, But what we were talking about before about needing that strength to go to hell. That's just integration of the shadow,
Mm.
pure and simple. And I think it's hilarious that humanity has been sort of researching morality through religion for like 100 to 160,000 years or something, maybe millions, I don't know. And then all of a sudden, in like the last 60 years, a couple guys walk onto the scene, you know, Freud and Jung and Nietzsche, and go, I got the answer. I understand what we are. Here we are. Reason and philosophy. Here's psychology. Bang. Now it's a science. Fuck. We're screwed now. Because we spent all this time researching it, which is what the religious setup is. And now all of a sudden it's in conscious articulated thought. It's like you can't run from it now. You're going to be gripped. If you don't understand psychology, you don't know who you are, and you spend your life headlong into brick walls.
I would argue that it's been in someone's conscious articulated thought for at least 1,000 years. And the forms that it has been in are far more developed than modern psychology.
Okay. Conscious articulated thought.
Encoded in symbolism.
Yes, that still, for me, lands in the realm of mythology.
Most people will look at the symbolism and get the odd glimpse of it like we're doing, but who created that symbolism? Who thought up that symbolism in the first place? They had to have the understanding of a hell of a lot more than just that bit.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. But, actually, no. No. You're making the assumption that knowledge comes from articulated first and then is represented in myth and image.
No, I don't think so.
Well, no, we extract out knowledge from myth and image. The myth and image comes first.
For an individual, yes.
No. For the creator, for the society, for everyone. That's how human beings learn. The part of your mind that is conscious is unbelievably tiny, and that's the last step in, I don't know how long, certainly thousands of years long, of a development of learning, which is first action, then imitation of that action, and then ritualization of that action, and then storytelling about the ritualization of that action, which becomes into the myth scenario, and there you start to get your extraction and your archetypes of particular types of action, and then out of that is extracted out conscious and articulated thought. That's the last stage. We're built upon a biological platform, which means that the myth comes first. All of our knowledge emerges out of myth.
Yes,
we don't,
but with a cycle over each generation. So each new generation goes... Sorry?
We have to discover things for the first time somehow, and we don't discover them from conscious thought before it's understood in mythological terms.
So you're saying that the myth can be created and passed on before the understanding of the myth?
Action, representation in ritual, so embodiment of action that's seen, representation in image, which is the myth, representation in words. That's the last step. That's how we learn. Something happens, we represent it in action, which is ritual, we represent that, and then what happened in myth, which is story and image mostly, and then from that image we finally go, that's what that meant in
but
words.
The image is presented usually in oral histories.
Yeah, but they weren't literal, because that's very new. And
yes,
they may have said the things, but what they were describing is stories and image.
Yes, and over the stories and images are a highly compressed form of knowledge that's passed on through the generations, and each one that delves into the secrets of it and extracts out the meanings encoded therein can add a little bit maybe in their turn, and over time it's elaborated.
I don't think that it is... Okay, add a little bit back into the myth. Yes, but the process still remains the same. That these knowledge, the learnings that we have, the ideas that we have, philosophies that we have articulated are bottom-up emergence from action. And that is the process of chain it goes through. That we represent a great hero before we can say, that behavior, this exact philosophy, as articulated out as a set of rules or a moral principle stated explicitly, that comes last. It's an unbelievably long chain of learning. And that's where all of our thoughts come from. That's the idea of speaking in the language of dead philosophers. And those dead philosophers spoke in the language of prophets, effectively. And it goes all the way down the chain. Otherwise, you have to make the case that one day there was a monkey that went, I know, therefore I am, and now I'm going to write a book to translate this. It's like, no, we evolved, and our learning evolved too. It doesn't bang into conscious form. I am rational and I have a rational image of a thing. Let me paint a picture to communicate it to all the savages. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's the other way around.
I agree with that. I think the part that I'm disagreeing with is you're taking it as a linear, at least how it sounds to me, is that you're taking it as a linear trajectory with its ups and downs along up to the present day.
Yeah.
I would have the trajectory reach the present level in terms of the highest level of human understanding on the planet far before the present. But
okay.
In a form that is very different to what we understand it as.
In terms of history, yes, I agree. What I'm trying to... I don't mean the present as in this present moment, and this is all that we know, and this is the most we've ever known. I mean it only as the process. That this is where articulated knowledge comes from, and this is how it develops. Even for the most high point of articulated knowledge in our history, which, if you believe it's before us, it still went through that process.
Yes, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant, is that while it may be lots of little feedback loops in the system, it's still flowing through that direction, that the mythological stories will always contain embedded within them more information and knowledge than we have consciously articulated. Always.
But then you can expand that out by consciously articulating the knowledge already within it.
Yes, and the stories will expand out faster.
Yeah. So I think it's important to clarify.
It's like a sliding scale, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. You talked about me saying the pinnacle of human knowledge had come before the present. I don't think that everything that we know now was known by the people in the past, and I don't think that everything that was known by people in the past is known by us in the present. I think that we've gone in different directions. Like the knowledge of ancient Egypt, there was a civilization that lasted for thousands of years in a culturally continuous manner. We've
gone through this one before, although I do think we should do a full conversation on that. But I'm trying to think.
Another one.
We need to bound this somehow.
Yeah.
We've gone on this great journey, and I think we've touched on a lot of things, and we hit our real high point like 10, 15 minutes ago. And we've sort of been playing with a bunch of ideas after that, there's nothing wrong with that. But we were aiming for a place, and we hit it.
Yeah.
And now we've just been sort of describing a bunch of stuff around that, things that come up that are interesting. Which is what we've done in the past with person, and what I've done with other people whose conversations end up lasting like 6 or 8 hours. Let's not do that.
Yeah.
We can do that, but I think we're going to end it somehow and contain it somehow. And so maybe, I don't know, a quick recap of the powerful vision that we had that sort of closed that conversation. I don't know, you were going to say something, sorry?
No, I think it was just one of the points that we were already covering.
Oh, okay, right. How about you? Do you want to recap what you thought my final point was? Because it might be valuable to see that re-articulation from the other mindset.
The final point regarding myth and understanding there, or hope for the future,
No.
and actually
The positive vision, and then we sort of discovered that is laid upon the moral action of the individual and their aim. And then we talked about the choices and the power of awareness of the consequences of action in the present moment.
Yeah, I think the key final point out of all of that for me is you can do more. You can do almost no more, but you can do more. It's like there are people who are so depressed that sitting up in bed is more than they can manage.
Oh, I see.
Right? They can do a tiny bit more. And
right now,
like the tree reaching the roots down to hell and up to heaven with the branches at the same time. Like if you sit there and look at the tree, how the hell is it ever going to get anywhere? Right? You sit there and look at it. Like you as an individual, you don't need to do anything fast. Just think, okay, I want to be a bit better. And if thinking that one thing is all you can manage, then do that, and then just try a little bit more. It's like if
I think that's a really good point to expand on. Actually, we talked about this great vision of being the person who could, in all moments, act in that way and always choose good. And then we talked about how difficult it is for someone who's in the dark place to do that. And you said something before that I thought was really important, which was you can be better. So as far as what I'm concerned, what you said, you can be better, but not a lot better right. You didn't say right now, but I added right now. And I think that's the key thing. It's like, 1, you can be better. 2, you may not be able to be a lot better right this instant. You're not going to be 50,000 times better right now. But if you're a little bit better for the next 10 seconds, and then a little bit better after that, keep going as long as you need, you can go from the darkest place to the brightest light that you've ever met. I believe that that's the capability of every individual.
Yeah.
And I think that it's important to add that on to, for anyone listening, or for us even, no matter where you are in your life, you can always aim up and be better, and it is worth it that you do that, not only because it is better for you, but it is better for everyone you care about and existence itself, and that you can do it and that it's worth doing it. But also, if you continuously do that, you can go from as pathetic and broken as you might imagine you are, and maybe you're really in a bad place, as bad as it can be, you can go from that to being, the light of the world.
And even if you're not in a bad place now, life is turbulent, and you look statistically, you'll have bad stuff happen. Either you or someone you care about will have a bad illness, right? Even just from old age. Like if your parents get cancer, one after another, that's
that. So if you have yourself together before you walk, before that happens to you, then you can actually manage it without breaking.
Yeah. Which isn't to say that it'll be a great success. Like you get through it without breaking, which cannot be understated. And like life's turbulent, and you climb up here and you get knocked down.
It's still a tragedy. There's no way to say that it's a good thing that it happened, but you can at least not make it worse. And when you have a loved one who's going through hard times like you couldn't believe, if you are well put together enough to be there for them and help them through it, you might as well be the greatest person who ever lived to that other person. You can be as broken as you like, but if you are able to withstand it, you can take what would have been absolute hell and make it merely a horrible tragedy, which is still a lot better. And for a person who's in that state, if you've ever been in that state and had an encounter with someone who's doing that, it changes everything. It can make it can make cancer something enlightening and ecstatic in a weird way. It's such a weird thing to say for someone who hasn't been through a situation like that. But even in the darkest of times, having yourself put together will still bring forth the light.
Yeah, and even if it looks like you climb up and the situation changes, your kid hits adolescence and everything goes to hell. If you've climbed up, you'll be better than you would have been otherwise. Like, being knocked down from a low place is very different to being knocked down from a slightly less low place.
Yeah, and you're more likely to withstand it. You're not going to get knocked as far, and you're not as far down to be knocked from. So it's nothing but positive. And imagine if the world put themselves together like that, what we could accomplish. There's your positive vision, man. Like, that's what I mean by if we got our act together. And that was, albeit I was trying to describe this technological vision, but really that's it.
Even if you take out all the technology, that bit's still there.
I mean, I think that would be a consequence of this, but throw that out the window. I sort of wanted to aim at that because that's the consequence of the sort of technological discussion we were having about oil and stuff. But really, for me, as it always been with our conversations, it comes back to morality. It always does. And that, for me, is the bedrock. Is if every person in the world actually aimed at good, even if it was terribly, but still like above 50%, I think things would be a lot better. And I think that would be great and worth doing.
Yeah.
So, let's do that and not the other thing, because I've read some books on that, and I don't want that.
Yeah. So, in the Second World War, British mental health went up during the Blitz.
Yes.
It's like people would climb out of their bombed houses, go to work, pull the desk out of the rubble, and sit down to work.
Back to work. We got mountains to climb.
Yeah, and
we got ships.
Hitler couldn't understand how he couldn't break them. There's other stuff behind all that, but like, it's by pulling together and like in hard times, people pull together. There's a YouTube channel that I like that's pretty good with good philosophy, like Stories of Old. And one of the videos he did was looking at how people act in disaster situations, because so often you hear about, there's been an earthquake, there's fears of looting and such, and okay, let's look at how people actually act in those situations. And
I had nothing but positive experiences during the Christchurch earthquake. That everyone was kind and helped the entire time, and everyone just, as soon as it happened, everyone came outside. And everyone was going around to everyone else on the street and being like, "Are you okay?" That was just everyone. Everywhere you go, you walk past people, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Hugging people who were crying. It was.
Yeah, and frankly, if a few things move out of shops without the benefit of a financial transaction during the chaos, I don't really care. It's like, I've got other things to deal with.
Yeah, but here's the other thing: is that I know that happened because I went into a shop. And the owner was there, and he was just like, "Bro, just take it." I just went in and I was like, "Do you have something to drink?" She's like, "Have whatever you want." He didn't care. He was like, "I'm not going to be asking for money from you right now. If you're thirsty and you need something to drink, you fucking get a drink. Because I have drinks and you need one. And this has happened." People aren't people aren't sitting on the street corner selling water to the thirsty person after the earthquake. They're giving it away. And that's all that I saw. We walked home for like 15 kilometers, and everywhere we went, people were offering us food the whole way home. There was no threat in the air. Everyone was supportive and caring of everyone else.
Mm.
People come together. It's funny how a tragedy like that can immediately snap people into, oh, the world is actually horrible. Fuck, I better be on point and help everyone.
Yeah,
because
it's like if you
I don't
slip,
actually
you grab onto
suffer.
stuff, and when you get that emotional slip, you grab onto people.
Yeah, and it's not grabbing on to help me; it's to help the other. That's what what really got me is that everyone wasn't going, "Am I okay? Can you help me?" It was, "Can we help that person?" That was the whole thing.
Mm.
And I think that's humanity itself. And
Yeah.
we become so detached from the horror of the world with our glass boxes and our heated stuff and our safe spaces that the second that chaos returns in the form of something that's actually threatening and serious, everyone goes, "Oh right, I care about other people. I don't care about myself."
Mm.
Like, I want to make sure people aren't suffering, and let's get through this as a people.
Yeah.
And then it returns, and we go, "Well, I want another TV though." But the second something drastic happens, it's like, well, I'm throwing that out the window so I can make sure my neighbour eats.
Mm.
So even though we may be all selfish in the modern times, and we worry that that selfishness will lend to some kind of dystopian Mad Max kind of scenario, I think the second things start going really bad, it's not going to be everyone hoarding food for themselves. It's going to be everyone going to the community centre and going, right, how do we organise? Where do we get food? Where do we get water? Let's make sure everyone lives.
I think if it's fast, yes. If it's a slow grinding one where everyone gets the feeling that
It depends on how
yeah.
much people say to themselves and to others.
Do you want to say that again? My audio cut yours off.
Sorry, it depends on how much people lie to themselves and others. If it's a slow grinding thing and people start corrupting themselves and acting deceitfully, then yes, it's a bad place. Which is why the snack thing wakes people up instantly. It's like, boom, the thing has happened. Oh, fuck. I need to be conscious and aware of this. Adrenaline kicks in, and then you're hyper aware. And because of that, you are hyper aware, and you go, right, only good actions. Not even an option. It's not even a consideration in that kind of environment to act self-interestedly. It's weird.
Because you
I
feel
don't
too threatened to risk it.
You don't feel it. You don't feel
Not
it. You
consciously.
feel a buzz in the air. Everyone is on edge. Everyone is worried about everyone else. Because the fact that I can stand and I can walk around, I'm okay. Can everyone else? You're walking past people on the street who are like on the floor crying. It's like, you check that person. We got to make sure they're okay. There was, people hanging out of buildings waving T-shirts at us. Come and help me. And it's like, fuck, how do we get up there? How do we get that person? I was 12, so I wasn't climbing into the leaning building like this for the guy that was hanging out the window, but someone did. And they didn't do it because they got paid. They did it because they wanted to help that fucking guy. And that's what it comes down to. We got to put a pin in this somewhere, otherwise we're just going to keep ranting forever. Or at least I will.
Yeah,
Get worked up.
I think that's a good point to end it on. We're on an hour and 3/4 now, so...
Right,
yeah.
I should probably go to family something. You should probably do the same. That's probably pretty important. There we go. Why don't we go back to our lives and actually act in the way that we philosophized about acting for the last couple hours?
Yeah,
hopefully it was helpful.
Putting it into practice is always more difficult than talking about it, but until you start talking about it, it's almost impossible to put it into practice.
All right. Yeah. You have to understand the consequences of it before you can be serious enough to actually stop yourself from wanting the extra sweet, even though it's a deceitful action or whatever. We don't teach kids that anymore, which is why they steal and lie all the time. You need to fix that.
Oh well.
Anyway, sign up when you like. You're in charge of the recording.
Thank you, everyone, and I hope someone watches this and gets some value from it.
Someone will discover it one day.
Yeah.
I think we have to need more conversations. And someone one day is going to be like, "Oh my god, this is awesome! No one knows about this, and there's like 150 things. Holy shit!" That'd be great.
You'll get 100 hours of video, and then someone will discover it and binge it and not sleep for a week.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it's me, you, and one other person who we don't know. So, that person. Hope you have a good day, and live it.
Yeah. Say hi.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you. Till next time.
Yeah, see you around.